Force, I heard.
The Force is what gives the Jedi his power.
Why is the Force connecting us?
I am a Jedi. Always two there are.
We're a dyad in the Force.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Force Dyad Podcast, a Star Wars show covering the latest and greatest from the core world to the outer rim. If Star Wars is your space, we are your place. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you're new to the show, thanks for swinging by. And if you're a returning listener, welcome back. If during today's show you find yourself enjoying what you hear, be sure to follow or subscribe to the show. And if you could drop a rating or review, it's quick, easy, and free to do. Today is a very special episode as we are recording this for Star Wars Podcast Day, which this year marks 25 years of Star Wars podcasting. If you're listening on release day, February 7th, it was 25 years to the day that the very first Star Wars podcast, Jedi Talk, took to the HoloNets. We, along with nearly 100 other shows, are taking part to celebrate this milestone, and we are honored to be but a small part of the whirling dervish that is Star Wars podcasting. I'm your host, Obi-Sean, and on today's episode, I'm joined by none other than the master himself, Jedi John. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, I'm doing great. How we doing?
Doing
again.
Doing excellent. Doing excellent here for Star Wars Podcast Day. Another year, another celebration.
Another year. It's not our third, is it? It's our second podcast day, right?
It is. It is the second podcast day that we have participated in.
Right. Yeah.
So
we turned 3 this year. Can you believe that? Oh my gosh.
yes, we turned 3. Yes.
Yes,
May.
we turned 3.
In May. That's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah. Insane.
We're almost three-nagers.
Can't believe it. In dog years, though, we're 9, so we're doing really well.
We're doing all right. So we got some fun stuff to talk about today. You came up with the idea for today's episode, so why don't you tell the lovely listeners at home what it is we're going to be chatting about today?
Yeah, so today we're going to hash out the best way to view Star Wars if you've never seen it before. We are just going to play within the movies. We'll call it the mainstream movies. So episodes 1 through 9, and then Rogue One and Solo. So we will place 11 movies in an order, which may surprise some of you. We'll see what happens. Sean and I have not revealed our orders to each other yet, so pretty excited to get into it. I think there's going to be some surprises and should lead to some great debate. So, yeah. I mean, we can just get started. Let's roll right into it. I mean, it's going to be I guess we'll play the game. We'll give the overview first of what our preferred order is, and then we'll go into the details, I guess.
That's fine. Did you actually write something down? Because I have nothing prepared.
You're winging it? You're just going to wing it?
Well, I'm not so much going to wing it. So I have a bit of, I would say, unfair advantage because I just went through this with 2 coworkers who had never seen Star Wars before, who had asked me how I would suggest people watch and consume the movies, and so I'll probably speak to that, but I may also audible based on which direction you go.
Well, it's interesting. I did introduce my wife to Star Wars. She had never seen it before. I started her with Rogue One and then moved right into the OT and then went back and grabbed the prequels. So almost release order, but I plugged Rogue One first because it was in theaters at the time when we had just started dating. So
okay.
Yeah, so we decided to start there, which was hilarious for me because in the movie theater, she leaned over about halfway through and was like, I really like the droid. And it was K2SO. And the first thought in my head, because I had already seen this movie, was he's the first one that dies. So this is going to be really exciting for her.
How did she take it? Did she take the loss well?
Oh, not well. She's like, after about the third death, she's like, what movie did you bring me to see? And I'm like, yeah, they all pretty much die. Like, you're watching a movie where most people are going to die.
Yeah. All of the main characters that you have spent the last hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes
Yeah.
becoming connected
Potentially
to,
attaching yourself. Yeah.
will find their ways, find their demise, Game of Thrones style. So yeah, it.
Yeah, but I'm not a huge fan of that way, based on feedback from my wife. So
Mm.
I have come back and reapproached it, as if I was showing it to somebody else new, and it changed a little bit. So there's two main ways that I've looked at this topic. One of them is the classic Machete way. I'm sure you've heard that term as far as Star Wars viewing goes. That would be 4, 5, and then go back and pick up 1, 2, 3, watch 6, 7, 8, 9, and then you fit in Solo or Rogue One wherever you feel like it, because that style just focuses on the main storyline of 1 through 9. But the other way is considered, I guess you could call it legacy, or it's weird. This is actually a weird one, and it's got me intrigued, so I'm kind of curious to your thoughts. But it has you start with Solo, because it's a good entry point to the Star Wars universe, because you don't really need to know anything. You probably know who Han Solo and Chewbacca are just because you live in, you're alive currently, and you've seen something that has to do with Han Solo and Chewbacca sometime in your lifetime. Whether or not you like it or not, it doesn't matter. And then my phone is going crazy here. And then you come in, because it's the newest trilogy, you pick up 7 because it has a lot of flashing lights and it's cool. And we'll just stay with me. And then you pick up Rogue One, 4, 5, 6, 8, 1, 2, 3, 9. Did you follow that? So it was
Whoa.
Solo,
So it was Solo, Force Awakens.
Solo, Force Awakens, Rogue One.
Rogue One. Okay.
4, 5, 6.
Because
as soon as you get Rogue One, you got to go 4, 5, 6. Well, 4, 5 at least.
Okay.
But so 6, you go to 8.
So you get Last Jedi.
Yep. And then you
back
go 1, 2, 3
back to the prequels, and then you finish with Rise of Skywalker.
Yep.
What kind of drunken parakeet came up with that order?
I don't know.
Does that have a name? What is the name of that order that you said that was legacy?
It's considered legacy order, but I don't really. Do you want me to get the argument for it now, or do you want to give your order?
No. So I okay. This is probably going to derail the whole discussion, but like, how on earth does that make sense to watch it in that order? So you start with Rogue One. You start with Solo. Sorry, start with Solo. Okay, I don't mind that because that doesn't affect any.
Shouldn't affect
any character arc really. But to jump to the Force Awakens, you introduce again, well, I guess legacy characters, right, with Han and Chewie, which I guess makes sense, except that it then, for anything that's occurring in the original trilogy, i.e. Han being frozen in carbonite, you know that will not affect him at all.
Very true.
So, okay, so I'm interested to hear the argument for it, and then I will complete my argument on why that absolutely doesn't make sense.
So outside of that, like, because you obviously know that Han has plot armor, all the legacy characters have plot armor at that point, right? So you've eliminated a lot of suspense, right? You go back after you meet your legacy characters, like Luke, Han, and Leia. You go back and watch their original story together. So you enter 4, 5, well, Rogue One, because it leads right into 4, 5, 6.
Sure.
So you catch up with your legacy characters. So it basically lets you go back and watch your legacy characters, similar to how we originally watched our characters and then went back to meet Anakin and Obi-Wan as younger people. So it allows for that to go back.
Right.
Anyway, so you end with the legends, you go back and watch their story and then find out what kind of happened for them. And then you go back to
and
8.
You watch The Last Jedi. Because that ends Luke's
because
arc?
Rey wants. So it's because you go from 6 where Luke turns Vader,
Uh-huh.
and you go to 8 because that's why Rey wants Luke's help, is to work towards turning Ben away from the darkness.
Okay. Yeah. Uh-huh.
God. I immediately regret my decision here.
No, keep going. You're in it. You're in it. Follow through.
Yeah. Where is it?
So then you go back and do the prequels.
Oh, so Rey and them convince him to go back into the fight, and he saves the day at the end of the movie, right?
Okay. Yeah.
By distracting Ben.
Yep.
Then we go back to the prequel trilogy
Mm-hmm.
to answer what was the failure of the Jedi that everybody kept going on about. So you go back to the prequels now to learn about the Jedi and the. So basically, it's this is the what happened and what the issues are,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get to go back and find out what that looked like.
So it really doesn't care about story arcs. It's more.
Well, neither did Disney in 7, 8, and 9. So,
Okay.
I mean, come on.
That's fair, but to jump like that, to
Pretty crazy.
I would never think to actually watch the films like that. Again, I don't mind Solo being first. That's totally fine. But to I don't know, ruin's a strong word, but to steal what is perceived at the end of Empire Strikes Back as Han's like sacrifice to save everyone, right? Which we recognize that he ends up being saved. The whole reasoning behind why he had that done, because he was supposed to be killed off because he didn't really want to do the third movie, and he thought that was a heroic death, right? And then, but you remove all of that sort of emotion by watching Force Awakens and knowing that he's totally okay and he's coming back.
It's very true.
And it's very much the Grogu, or it's very much the Mando season 2 to Book of Boba Fett to Mando season 3 feel, where you have all this build up and then it's there and then you just wipe it away. So I think the angle that this, like I said, drunken parakeet is coming from.
Yeah. Well, and the ending is like, because you have Palpatine seducing Anakin in Episode 3, and then talking about like the infinite life that he can, like the eternal life that he can give. 'Cause
Sure.
he can make you immortal through the Sith ways.
Yeah.
Well, then you go to Episode 9, where, well, the man has done it. Like, he is.
Except you saw him thrown down the shaft at the end of 6.
Yeah, but then you see him come back in 9. So
Sure, but so Palpatine's thing about
he's not mentioned. He's
Yeah.
not mentioned anywhere else in the sequel trilogy until 9.
That is true. Yes, that is true.
That's what I'm saying. Like, the arcs in 7, 8, 9 are so broken anyway.
Yeah.
You could break up the movies and have them stand alone and be okay.
So, would you ever suggest that order to someone who had never seen Star Wars? Be honest with you. I understand that this is for, a discussion point, but like, if you were to ever come across someone who has never seen Star Wars, would you be like, yeah, watch it like this?
I'm not sure I could sell somebody on it.
Well, but they wouldn't know, right? They wouldn't know.
They wouldn't know. They wouldn't know. But I think I would probably have a conversation with that individual and be like, even though this is like what's suggested, or one of the ways that is suggested, which I don't have a problem watching it this way. Like, thinking about it. Now I know where you're coming from. Like, it takes some stuff away. But if you machete it, it takes a lot away from it also a little bit. Well, not so much, I guess. Yeah, well, it takes stuff away either way. I mean, there's always a way that you take it away. I think the other thing is like, well, I'll let you get into yours first. Let's get in your order.
Okay. All right. So, like I said, I had coworkers who had never seen Star Wars. I actually had one coworker who said he hated Star Wars so much that when his friend would turn it on, he would leave the house. Like he would leave his friend's house. That's how much he hated Star Wars. And I have converted not only him, but another one of my coworkers who has, within the last 3 months, consumed literally everything Disney Plus has to offer for mainstream Star Wars, minus Star Wars Resistance, because yeah, it counts, but not really. She's watched all the cartoons, all the live action, all the movies, and yeah, pretty impressive. So their question was, how do we watch the movies? And I asked them if they knew the big reveal, and they said no. And I said, okay, well, in that case, I would start honestly at the beginning. And I recognize that the prequels for some aren't the pinnacle of filmmaking. But then the same could be said for parts of the original trilogy as well. So everything has its flaws. And so I feel like if you start with, I don't mind against doing the solo, and even starting with solo, that would be fine, because it doesn't really fit in to a watch order per se, unless you wanted to go prequels and then kind of just go in numerical order. And the reason I told them that was because like my one coworker, he was all in. He was Team Anakin the whole way because he'd been watching the Clone Wars cartoons as well, and then the reveal happens. Like he finds out what happens to Anakin, and he's like, I was on board with him, and then he walks into the room full of younglings, and he's like, I couldn't do it. I couldn't believe he turned. And so for people who have never been exposed to Star Wars and know nothing about anything, basically, then I think because the prequels exist, it makes sense to start there. Understanding that, of course, you're going to have variation in special effects. I actually had to warn them that after they finished Revenge of the Sith, I said, okay, you're about to take a massive step back in technology and special effects. And while the special effects are incredible, and even today they still hold up, I'm like, it is nothing compared to computer, CGI effects. And so, and once they get past that, the what appears to be a reduction in visual quality, it builds off itself just fine. Now, having said that, if you know the reveal, and you know the story of Darth Vader, then I actually do kind of like the Machete version of it. And I know that there's another version where, like you watch, I think it's 4, and then you watch Rogue One, and then you watch A New Hope, and then you watch Empire Strikes Back up until about like an hour and 30 minutes, right? Like right before the big reveal.
Oh, where they cut it.
And then you go back, and then you do it that way. So it's like a modified Machete version, I suppose. But I think for anybody who is getting into Star Wars, I would never recommend that legacy order where you like. I couldn't do that just because it's not like the Clone Wars cartoon, right? Where that is so out of order, but you never actually know that it's out of order when you watch it, right? And so, and even though a lot of the characters have to make it to certain points in the timeline, so the tension is broken, right? And the plot armor is thick. There's still kind of an assumption that you're watching things chronologically, even though you're not. Whereas if you do your legacy order, and you watch Solo, like you said, and then you say you jump.
You go
You go,
you go to 7.
straight
You go
to Force Awakens. And I also think that by doing that, you rob A New Hope of its story. Not necessarily like the contents, but the structure, right? Because Force Awakens was an homage,
Yep.
heavily, right, to A New Hope. And so if you just watch the same film, but with different characters, right, and characters that, okay, I'm being introduced to Han and Chewie again, but after I saw them in Solo, right, because I've seen them young, I've now seen them old. I see them slightly older than they were in the first film. But everything about A New Hope is now similar or the same as The Force Awakens. And so, again, in that regard, I think you ruin sort of the magic that was the original Star Wars film. And so, yeah, for a seasoned Star Wars person, it actually, now that you've said it, I actually might go and do that just to see kind of like how it feels, just kind of dance with the dark side a little bit and just mosey on into it and see what that's like. Because for the life of me, that just hurts my brain to think about.
I really just had to find one that contradicted what I was probably going to agree with you on, so I had to find something that we could discuss.
I like that though. Like that's, it's good to get creative with mature, and I don't mean like adult themed items, but mature content, right? Like, we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of the original, the start of the original trilogy, and everything like that. We're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the prequels this year. So these films have been out a long time. And so sometimes it's fun to toy around with the watch order to freshen things up. And so I don't mind that. But if
For never watching it, some people will argue that if you've never seen it, you should watch the sequels first because they're the newest. There is that argument out there because it's the most modern movies. Because for some people, just getting into something, they want the newest one because if you show them the original trilogy first, they're like, I'm just watching an old movie and I'm bored because of the effects, because of other things. So like I can see the argument being made for you watch the newest ones because the effects are the best. It's a modern movie that they should be used to, and they can meet some characters, which is one of the arguments for the way that they did it was Solo, pretty modern movie, and then you hit the first one of the sequel trilogy, which is a very modern movie, obviously, and then you go back and meet the characters after you have some plot points of, what were they talking about? When did this happen? You meet some old characters that everybody looks up to, and then you go back and see their story. So I get where it's going. I would personally prefer a Machete style watch, or I could also make the argument just go in chronological order. So just take it, start at 1, fit Solo in wherever you want to, probably right after 3, and then watch Rogue One and go into 4.
Yeah. Now, do you ever, or would you ever suggest to someone new to start with the original trilogy in its entirety?
That's what I did with my wife, except for Rogue One started it. I think the only thing that was a mistake for her was because she likes the suspense, so she knew like, oh, Obi-Wan's here, he's not gonna die, so there was a lot of like, when she had the plot armor in front of her, she's like, this is kind of boring because I know what happens, like I know Anakin goes to the dark side, I know that, I know this, like. So, because Vader being Luke's father is not a reveal anymore. Like, now Vader being Anakin might be a reveal to somebody. Sure. But Vader being Luke's father is not a. The movie's been out for 45 years. Like, it's just not a reveal anymore. Like, common knowledge that Vader is Luke's father.
Right, and it's only spoiled if you want to say it, at the end of Revenge of the Sith. If you pay close enough attention to the names given to the kids, then you know, right? Like, oh, Anakin is Vader, right? Because you're right. Until he's redeemed, no, you can't really put two and two together. Even though, Obi-Wan talks about Anakin, and everything like that. But watching, obviously, we watched the original trilogy first because that's all we had, right?
Right.
And so now, yeah, it's hard to argue against chronological. Even with how people feel about the thing is, like, if you have a new person coming into the story, they're not swayed by anything that's been said in the past, right? Like about Jar Jar or about little Anakin or teenage Anakin and sort of the
or
things
the
that
Phantom Menace sucking, normal stuff.
but it didn't, right? Like,
It didn't suck. I know.
It didn't. But yeah.
Mostly the Anakin stuff. Mostly the Anakin stuff was the most complained about stuff.
And Jar Jar, right? But like, you don't know that, right? So you're coming in blissfully unaware of and completely uncorrupted or unbiased going into it. And so you're watching it, you're like, okay, this character's kind of goofy. This character is acting like an 8-year-old, and yeah, I mean, he's kind of whiny and everything like that. So like, it all makes sense to the uninitiated, and so there's no. I don't know. I understand the argument for starting with the sequels because they're new, but for the same reason, I think the legacy thing doesn't make sense. You've completely removed any tension for the main characters for the previous 6 films.
Right.
Or at least the original trilogy, because it's really just Luke, Leia, and Han. You don't really get Obi-Wan, obviously, in the sequels, so that doesn't really ruin anything, and you don't get Anakin in that. So, but to watch it and then you see Rise of Skywalker, like, who is Luke Skywalker, and why do I care about this hermit who is living alone on this island, who is tossing lightsabers over the edge, who's, why do I care about this character? Why is this character important to me? And then you go back and you're like, oh, okay, I guess I see it now.
Similar to the Machete style, right? So you go 4 or 5, and then you're like, okay, I need to know more about Vader and what made Vader. I know it's Luke's father now because I just got the reveal. So I want more story about Vader and how he came to be. So then you go back and watch the prequels, and then you come back and catch Return of the Jedi after you watch all 3 prequels. Because that's what Machete is. So
right, yeah, and I agree with I like that format. What I would add to that, and I know we're sticking to just the story, to just the films, but
oh yeah,
I think that the Clone Wars cartoon is almost must watch, or at least like find some sort of compilation that, because there is so much stuff that happens between obviously Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, that and the fall for Anakin over that arc, which then of course comes to a head in the final, or in the 3rd movie. Like, I think for a complete viewing, that needs to be part of it. Like, you could obviously integrate in like Andor for Rogue One, and like Kenobi for the in-between, of course.
yeah.
But like, those I think are supplementary. Like, I feel that the Clone Wars animated series is almost, I'm going to say like 95% must watch programming, like, along with the films. And if you're going to do like a watch order, and I even told my coworkers this, I'm like, if you have time, which you probably won't, but if you want to do it like this, I would slot these in, slot this TV show, these cartoons in here, because you're going to get so much more backstory on your characters. It's not even funny. So,
yeah, I think part of the big one there is you could take just the end of Clone Wars, just the final season, and kind of just insert it. And I mean, I'm sure there's YouTube channels that have already done it where they slice in some of the scenes from the final season of Clone Wars into episode 3 because it's happening shot for shot with it, just in different places of the galaxy. So you could input some of that stuff happening while, and if they can watch that movie as it is, I think it adds like 30 minutes to the film if they chop it correctly, maybe a little bit longer than that, but you could really watch a lot of stuff happening for Anakin that we see the outcome of in episode 3, but I didn't see all that happen. Like, there is stuff that's happening off world with Anakin that you can see in the animation that are like, oh, that's happening right now as they're working through other things. So I don't know, pretty interesting stuff. I mean, I would agree that watching the Clone Wars is almost must see, like with your first watch, because it gives you so much context on stuff. So.
Now, would you ever, for someone who's new, would you ever say to someone, oh, you don't need to watch this? Now, again, understanding that we're talking about the films exclusively, right? Is there something that you would ever tell a new viewer not to watch?
I don't think it's a not to watch. I think it's I would try to let them go unbiased in. Like, I would not try to put my bias on somebody. If I was going to do that to somebody, though, I would probably just say, take the sequel trilogy with a huge grain of salt. And if you're going to skip a movie, go ahead and skip 8 and just pick it back up with 9, because literally nothing happens of any sort of consequence in 8. So,
other than the fact that you would not get Luke's story completing, whether you like it, for good or for bad, you don't get the closure on Luke. Because you go from him literally throwing the lightsaber over the edge to now he doesn't exist anymore.
A Force ghost. Perfect.
So somewhere in between, he's just
the dude made a mistake by throwing his lightsaber off the cliff, and then he got murdered because he threw his lightsaber off a cliff. That's his fault. That's reason I can come to the conclusion that he died.
That's funny. That's funny. So we agree.
I really just don't like 8, man.
I know. And the thing with the sequels, is
well. Would you warn somebody not to watch something?
No, I don't think so. I do remember, actually, again, going back to my coworkers, who they watched. I think my one coworker stopped at 7, and hadn't continued on. And so I was referencing something one day and talking about something that happened. He's like, wait, when did that happen? I said, oh, that was in 8, episode 8. And he's like, oh yeah, I don't think I watched that one. I said, yes, okay. Well, when you do, just be aware that certain things aren't going to make a whole lot of sense. Especially, we had a good talk about it, about the end scene, the Battle of Crate, right? With
oh, yeah.
How in the heck, aside from, the speed of plot, right? Does Rose end up coming out of nowhere to save Finn, right? But,
and then how they get back is just amazing.
Sure. Right. And so again, you recognize that plot, well, again, the speed of plot is a thing in films. And so they were asking me all these questions like, how did that happen? I said, you know what? It's best not to think about that, because it will not make sense. It's because
best not to ask these questions. Please don't do that. Please don't ask these questions.
It's and that's and there are certain things that happen, of course, in the prequels and even the OT that you're like, why, why did they do that, or why was this needed, sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, you have to suspend a lot of belief. I mean, you're watching a
Of course,
sci-fi
it's Star
film, so
Wars.
you absolutely have to suspend some of your belief. But um, some of the stuff, yeah, I mean, you can't suspend enough. So you just are like, just don't think about it. Just enjoy the film because it's a movie.
Well, and I think a lot of things, some of the things too that happen in the sequels, since we're on that topic, are some of those things are explained in other media that a lot of people are not consuming at all. Whether it's the books or comics, or maybe it's like a mini series, or some other sort of content. Whether it's the Force.
Just to be clear, though, the First Order ships have their own gravitational pull to pull bombs into them. Just remember that.
Okay, so I have explained that to you on more than one occasion, and all you need is a propulsion system to push them down, and because there is no gravity, or because there is no gravity in space.
There's no gravity. It just goes until it hits something. I know.
And who knows, maybe that direction was up. What orientation is up and down in space? There is no up and down in space. There's
They never
just
told us what was up.
there's just vastness. But
It's very true.
so, but whether it's the Force healing, or the Leia being able to survive for a period of time in space, or stuff like that, right? That's something that has been explained before, but for someone who's never seen it or watched, doesn't know anything outside of the movies, they're gonna see it and go, "That's cool. Why didn't Obi-Wan use that on Qui-Gon?" In The Phantom Menace, and the answer is
cool.
And the answer is because, Anakin needed a reason to not have that solid father figure structure, so that he could eventually turn to the dark side.
And if Anakin would have known that, because if Obi-Wan would have been able to teach him that power, he wouldn't have gone to the dark side, because he wouldn't have been seduced by Palpatine, because he would have already known how to save Padme by giving my Force life to her.
Well, the irony of it all is that Anakin saw through again, going to the Clone Wars cartoon, right, which we've talked about as must watch, the whole saving of Ahsoka with the daughter using her life force, being the light side of the Force, to save someone. Like the dark side, and I'm going off topic slightly, but I mentioned it last episode about listening to the Bane books, right? And which I've started the third book now. I finished the first two. It's just like a drug. I just get in the car and I hit play, and it's fantastic. But anyways, it is made abundantly clear, and I think it's referenced elsewhere too. The dark side has no healing at all. Like, there is no way to heal in the dark side. There's a way to, through rage, keep yourself alive, right?
Sustain,
and
to sustain yourself,
to sustain life, but there is no way to heal others through the dark side. And so the irony of it all is that Anakin was never going to get the power he was after, because it was not any power that Palpatine could share. So it was just, and even worse was the fact that, I guess in a way it was not retconned, but with stuff that happens in the Clone Wars cartoon, it's like, how does Anakin forget what happened on Mortis? And anyways, that's slight diversion.
I mean, the same thing with how does Obi-Wan forget about R2-D2?
Yes. Well, Tatooine has been rough to old Ben.
We've seen it. Yeah.
So, but yeah. So no, I wouldn't tell anybody not to watch anything. Like you said, I would advise them to suspend their disbelief, perhaps to a greater level, on certain things. But again, you're watching a story about space wizards, laser swords, and pew pew ships. So there's really no realism in it to begin with. And if you go into a sci-fi film, or a space opera, or a space fantasy, or whatever you want to classify Star Wars as, you already know that absurdity is just around the corner.
Stuff's gonna happen. Yeah, stuff's gonna happen. You're not gonna know why, but it happened.
Exactly. And and you look forward to
Although
those
they didn't
things.
have an airlock on that bomber. So weird. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, it's fair. That's a fair point.
The bomb door was not sealed off from anywhere else on the ship. It was just one.
Yeah, it was just one channel, like just one shaft, just a monster shaft. If I move my hand like this more, does it make you uncomfortable? The answer is yes.
And the remote with no propulsion mechanism fell off of a platform with open space around it.
Yeah, let's not focus
Just
on that opening scene.
like I
Let's
said,
not focus on
like
that
I
scene.
said, don't ask those questions. You're not gonna like the answer. Anyway, but yeah, no, I mean, I truly, I looked up a way to watch it that would be a little bit debate, like we could debate it, it'd be fun. Just because I didn't want to just agree with you that Machete or chronological are the best ways to go, because that's what should happen. I think that those are two fine ways to watch the movies, and you can insert Solo wherever you want to, pretty much, because it just doesn't affect a whole lot. So,
But as I would tell anybody, you need to watch Solo because it is a fun movie. It's just a fun movie,
yeah, it's
right?
a fun movie.
And
Make Solo too.
it was unfairly truncated, let's say, because of things that may or may not have been a direct result of Episode 8 and the backlash from the fandom and everything like
the
that.
week before having the largest movie that's ever been made come out. Yeah.
Yep. And so, yeah, but Solo in and of itself is a really fun film, and it's got that cowboy western feel to it, and the train heist and whatnot, and plus you get a little bit more backstory on the underworld, the crime syndicates, I should say, which, again, if you watch the Clone Wars, you will understand.
Yeah.
Which is why
No more.
Clone Wars is a must-watch, because it ties into so many things.
So good.
Rebels too, but Rebels is, I'm not going to say Rebels isn't, like, you don't need to watch it because it's really good, but there's...
Yeah, Rebels is one of those things, like, you need to watch if you're going to watch Kenobi, like the TV show Kenobi, because it places Obi-Wan where he needs to be for other things to happen. So, like, because if you watch Kenobi alone, outside of knowing that that's where he ends up for A New Hope, it's just not as rewarding knowing that he needs to stay there for other reasons.
Sure. Yeah, you obviously know he's going to be there at the end of Revenge of the Sith, so you
Right.
don't need Rebels to help you know that, but getting the standoff with Maul eventually is choice. It is choice. So yeah, that was... Do you have anything else to add on this topic? I don't. I think we've...
Do you want to talk about the Clone Wars movie?
We can. I will be honest and say that I have never seen it. So...
I've only seen it once, and I don't consider it a mainstream movie. So, and it was horrendous. So,
Well,
I'm good.
I know it holds significance because it was the first piece of material to introduce Ahsoka, right? Like Ahsoka was
Ahsoka,
introduced
yeah.
in the film. So in regards to...
And it has alternate names for, like, Rex as Alpha and stuff like that.
Right.
So,
plus you get more, if I remember right, you get a lot more exposure to some of the planets that we see at the end of Revenge of the Sith. And of course stuff that you see in the Clone Wars cartoon later, but I can't think of the names of the planets right now. But anyways, like with Aayla Secura and stuff like that, you have...
Oh, and like Felucia. and stuff like that, yeah.
Felucia, yeah, thank you. Like the first battle
Yeah.
of Felucia and second, all these different battles, multiple things like...
Places like, and if you played video games and stuff like that, you've explored some of these worlds already, like separately from
Right.
other things.
With like
but yeah, it's
Battlefront
pretty-
and stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's one that I need to watch just to complete the series, I guess. But it's not one that's ever, although it is always suggested to me when I watch that, when you get to the end of the Clone Wars, it's like, hey, maybe you want to watch the film, and I'm like, maybe another time, and then I forget about it. So that's kind of on me. I need to do better.
I'm kind of curious now because I always laugh at that film. It's just not. It's not good. I'm gonna look up.
You and I should do a live stream where we
God.
watch it together, and then react to it. Like, people can come in, they can chill in the chat, and we can watch the Clone Wars film together. Would anybody listening like to do that with us? If you would,
It's a 5.9 out of 10 on IMDb.
that's not great. Out of how many did Posey Fan leave a review? Do you think?
I don't know if I want to go look for it.
How many ratings is like how many how many ratings
User reviews are there?
How many?
312 user reviews.
That's not very many.
That's interesting. Somebody gave it a 10 out of 10.
There it is.
Best starter to Star Wars: The Clone Wars. 9 out of 10. Why the hatred? This is awesome. 2 out of 10. It's great for kids, but will make fans and just about anyone else sick to their stomachs.
Wow. All right. You've piqued my interest. I'm going to watch this film. The next time we sit down to record, I will share my thoughts on the film.
5 out of 10. Next Star Wars sequel, I pretty much can guarantee we're gonna just see George Lucas playing with the Star Wars action figures. Oh, there's some actually pretty good reviews on here. I'm actually surprised it's such a low rating, looking at all these like 9 out of 10s and 10 out of 10s.
Well, but that's user reviews. The rankings, like the 5.9 out of 10 or whatever.
Oh yeah,
that's going to have thousands of people just clicking a number.
Anything
They're not gonna leave a review.
Right.
But regardless, you've piqued my interest, and now
I love this. I love some of these. Taking this stuff seriously anymore? Question mark. George Lucas isn't. Oh my gosh.
how rude.
3 out of 10. If you loved episode 2, Attack of the Clones, then you'll love this thing.
Well, see, I like Attack of the Clones.
So do I.
I actually enjoy that film.
I think it'll be good. Anyway, it probably is something that we need to go back and watch, but I did not really enjoy it the first time. Granted, since I watched that movie, I have watched the entirety of Clone Wars, the TV show, so it's possible that I can go back and watch it again and maybe get something different out of it.
Right. Exactly.
It's possible. I'm not against it.
You didn't have a good first experience.
We'll do it together.
Yes. That would be fun.
It'll basically, with as long as it's been since I've seen that movie, it'll be like I'm watching it for the first time, pretty much. So
Yeah, we should totally do that.
it'll be a lot of fun. But yeah, rankings overall good. We're pretty much in agreement, either Machete or in chronological order. Depends on how your viewer is taking it. I guess you could stop after if you start Machete. If you get to 5, you could always be like, we can either go on to the next part of the story, or you can go get the backstory on Darth Vader right now. And they can choose whether or not they want to go back to the prequels then, or go to 6 and then go back to the prequels after.
Yeah. So then it just becomes an OT.
Lead.
Prequel, lead with Rogue One starting it off. So,
but
that would probably be third for me. Would be the OT start. I'm going chronological, then Machete, then OT, and Legacy. If you've been a Star Wars fan for 20 years and you're looking to spice things up, then you go that Legacy, the Legacy watch.
It's interesting. I mean, the thought behind it was very interesting. That like, oh, you meet the characters, you get some plot points, you see the newness of Star Wars, and then you go back and learn about them. And then you come back up and get a new movie again. And then you go back and learn about why that happened. And then you finish.
And then you are done.
And then you're done.
Oh. All right.
Interesting stuff, though.
For sure. That was fun. That was a good discussion. I like those kind of off the wall chats. So, unless you have anything else, we'll wrap this bad boy up.
No, I think
Cool.
we're good.
So we want to thank you all for listening. If you've made it this far, be sure to follow or subscribe to the show, leave a rating or review, and link up with us on social media. Be sure to check the show notes for links to our social channels, and if you have things you'd like to hear in a future episode, our DMs are there to slide into. Check out the back catalog of episodes where you're sure to find something you'll enjoy and share us with your friends. And join us, and together we will rule the galaxy. We will leave you with this nugget of wisdom. I'm going to start putting in these like little things to end on before we shut down the show. So, the winding path to peace is always a worthy one, regardless of how many turns it takes. So with that, this brings the episode to a close. So for Jedi John and Obi-Sean, and until next time.
May the Force be with you.